Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Supercars Exchange podcast. As always, I'm joined by Shane. How you going, Shane?
Mate, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm going pretty good. Today we're going not so supercars related, but more just Holden and Ford related. Let's say we're going to be talking about our top five Holdens of all time. So we're going to be doing Fords next week, obviously, just to even it out, so no one gets mad at us. But yeah, it was Shane's idea to do this. So do you want to take it away for us, Shane?
Yeah, well, I'll go. No secret on this show. I'm a Ford fan, but you've always had to give credit where it's due. Holden have made some phenomenal cars over the years. So even as a Ford fan, you still sit back and just think, oh wow, that's something pretty special. So yeah, my top five Holdens over the years. I've started off with the VS GTSR. It was released in '96. It was actually quite powerful for the time, 226 kilowatts. It had I think they only had 75 built for Australia, then another handful that went over to New Zealand. It was, it looked good. It had the XU3 yellow. It was the only colour that it was available in. So very rare car for the time, and obviously for that reason worth a bit of a mint now. So I was, even as a Ford fan, I wouldn't have minded getting my hands on one of those. Then we got the HK Monaro. It's just a thing of beauty. It just doesn't take too much of a genius to work out how good they are, especially in that sort of bronze colour that you see. I'm not sure what the name of the colour was, but just looks awesome. Anytime you see one at a car show, or it's very rare to see a genuine one driving down the other way on the street. But you see the odd replica out there driving around town, but as soon as you see one, it turns your head. So it's even now it looks pretty awesome. In third place, I've gone with the VK Peterbrock Group A. VK Commodore in general is probably one of my favourite Commodores. I think just the way it looked more than anything. But it had a 170 something or other kilowatt engine back at the time. That still had plenty of power. That's more than enough power to play with there. And obviously, when you throw Peter Brock's name on anything, it's got his seal of approval. So
was that one of the ones with the crystals in it though? That's the question.
I don't think it had the crystals. I don't think that was. I think that one might have been before the crystals.
Okay.
They weren't performance enhancing crystals.
No,
so
unfortunately,
they didn't really do too much for the car. But it was. Well, it even had had a slightly trickier body kit to it, so it was it was always a good car. I've always enjoyed it. An old mate of mine, he had a stock VK Commodore from back in the day, and unfortunately he wrote it off. But it was just awesome still to look at. That's why I've always loved the VK Commodore. So, and then the Peter Brock one was just the tip of the iceberg for the VK Commodore.
Yeah.
Second place, I've gone for the VL Calais, the RB30 Turbo 6 version. Had 150 kilowatts. Probably was almost the original Australian made tuner car. It didn't. We hear a lot now about what they did to the XR6 Turbo and people getting big horsepower out of that. People were doing that 20 years ago with the VL Calais when it was released in the late 80s, and it didn't take too long for people to start doing it up, especially once they all started hitting the second-hand market. That was the first thing people did, was like, oh, let's see how fast we can make this thing go. So it was sort of the original Australian-made tuner car, which is what I always liked. And even though, yes, it was a Nissan motor, it was still in a VL Calais. So for that, and it looked better. Like it looked a little bit sleeker over the VK, and the Calais itself had those. It had the narrower headlights, so that just looked a little bit better than even the standard VL. So VL Calais, I think, was always going to be up there for me. Then in first place is the mighty VF GTSR. The final, or nearly the final, the Commodore or HSV. The VF, 430 kilowatts. Or I have seen videos where that 430 is quite exaggerated, but still, it was a weapon of a car. It was very low 4-second standing. So 0 to 100. It was big, powerful. It was fast. Obviously had all the kit and all the toys that you'd expect from a newer car these days. And for a bit of a last hurrah, obviously they had the one that went one up from that. I forget what that was called, the W1, I think it was, but that was very limited in its numbers. So I sort of thought I'd leave that one out because it was also $180,000, which was, that's out of my price range anyway. But the GTSR, you might be doing a bit of overtime for a few years, but it was still an achievable car for a lot of people. I think it was only still right around that $100,000, $105,000. So still a lot of money, but it's not impossible to get one. But I just thought it was always I just always liked the look of it. Like after the VE Commodore, like when the VE was released, I thought, it's it's a good looking car. It's big, beefy. But when it ran for so long, for so many years, I just sort of got over the shape of the VE and the HSV range had to go along with it. But when they released the VF, I'm like, it took a bit of time to grow on me. But then I thought, I'll actually quite like the lines of it a bit more over the VF. Over the VE. So the VF GTSR for there, and then an honourable mention that just missed out on my top 5 was the LX Tirana, the SLR 5000. Just because, again, look at it, it's a little pocket rocket. It looks like a car that's it's kind of like a little excited puppy. It thinks it's a bigger dog and can play with the bigger dogs, and it does. It can wallop them around the corners, and it's still a lightning bolt in a straight line too. So, LX Tirana. And it was one of the sort of first cars that had the big Larry colours, like you had the greens and the yellows and that sort of stuff too. So, whenever you see a picture of one or on a poster or in real life, it always stands out. So, the just missing out on my top 5 was the SLR 5000.
Nice. So we've got a couple of the same, but I think we have enough different in order to have a pretty good chat about it. So. So my first one is the HQ Monaro. I'd probably just go if I was to buy one of these ones, I'd probably just go for the 253, just because I've driven in a 253 before, and I just really liked that engine. But I especially love the look of the Monaro. It's just so simple, yet it just looks so nice and aggressive. Also, they just sound awesome. It was one of the first cars that my dad actually introduced to me, and I could actually spot them on the street kind of thing, and I could actually pick out Monaros. So that's why it has a kind of a special place for me.
Like I said, they stand out so well because it's sort of it's like an Australian take on an American design. Like it was, you could see where the American influence come from a lot of the GM hero cars at the time, and then we just sort of just made it a little bit more Australian, and that's what became so iconic about the Monaro.
Well, it's a bit like what Holden did with a lot of the General Motors cars, is they just built them for Australians kind of thing. Like they made the suspension better and so on, because Holden just started off as a coach building company, like building their own bodies for GM cars kind of thing. So you can see how that has influenced the Monaro into the 70s.
Yeah, that's right. Well, even then he was even doing Model T Fords back in the day as well. So that's where his start was from. He was doing the coach building and just doing whatever he was getting. So I know he was definitely building Fords at one stage, getting Model Ts out and making them a bit nicer. And then obviously then decided that I'm going to go make my own. And especially when it got into those late '60s through the '70s, you could really start to see the style and that. It's sort of a bit of an American. When you still see the Tiranas, you still see a lot of European influence in the car. But they've always been awesome cars. The Monaros, like I don't know anyone from either side of the camp, whether it's Ford or Holden, that can't look at a Monaro and think that, well, wow, that's something special.
Yeah. So my next one is a little bit more broad than the ones you've talked about. So my one is just the Holden 1-tonner Ute, the first generation. So the HQ, HJ, HX, HZ, and WB. So what's I like about this car is it was like the first kind of it's kind of say it's modern, but it was like the first kind of proper tough ute that could take a lot. Obviously, from the name, you can tell it can hold 1 ton on the back, and it had the leaf springs, which are pretty good for the time. And the option of, I think they came with the 202, most of them, the tradesman's version anyway of the 1-tonner, and then they had upgraded diff and drivetrain, so they were a proper tough vehicle. This one the 1-tonner holds a special place in my heart because I've got a 1-tonner. And my dad previously, when we lived in the territory, he drove it into the ground, and we left it in the front yard for like 5 or 6 years, and then we went and started working on it again. And it just started the same day that we started working on it. It just started like there was no issue. Exactly. It was great.
It's like a cockroach. You can't kill it.
Yeah, exactly. They're great. They're great cars. I really like it, and it's actually almost related to the next car I'm going to talk about, which is the Holden Commodore VL, because I'm looking at swapping an RB30 possibly into the Ute just to get more fuel economy out of the Ute, considering the 202 has terrible fuel economy. So if you're looking at a Holden 1-tonner, definitely consider the amount of fuel you're going to use. You're going to use a lot. Anyway, onto the Holden Commodore VL. So this one was made from 86 to 88. Shane talked about this car as well, but more specifically about... Which one did you talk about? Sorry.
I just had the Calais in general.
The Calais.
Mainly, I went for the turbo straight six, just because it was something quite different for the time.
Yeah. So I liked this car because I heard about the VL because I was watching a YouTube video actually, and they had a history of Holden, and they talked about how they got this engine from Nissan, the RB30, which is obviously quite an iconic engine because it's from the Skyline. And I just thought it was so cool that they had that Nissan engine in there. Obviously, at the time, Japanese cars and Nissan in general didn't really have the best reputation. So I just thought it was a pretty bold move of Holden to put it in there. And obviously it paid off because a lot of people love the Holden Commodore VL.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think, like when you're touching on Japanese cars, like I think at the time they just thought they're just, cheap little cars, nothing's great about them. But I think they always had reliability on their side.
Yeah.
Couldn't really break them too easy. So I think when Holden made the decision to jump in bed with Nissan and get their engine, I think it was probably the better option, because when you looked at the 6 cylinders they had before, they weren't overly high tech. They were probably quite thirsty for the time in comparison to even the V8s that were along there with it. So I think going to that, I could certainly just made the car a lot more modern. Like just overnight, suddenly we've got a turbocharged straight six engine, and it's better economy. Certainly would have been an increase in power. Even though 150 kilowatts isn't really a lot by today's standards, but at the time that would have been, especially seeing as how that would have made the car a couple of 100 kilos lighter than the V8 version. So that's straight away it's going to help with the power to weight anyway. So it probably still would have been quite quick.
So also just quickly mention that the VL Commodore was also raced in Group A. Um, it wasn't massively successful in actual Group A because obviously that was the same time around as well in '88 that was like the time of the Sierra and the Skyline. So the Commodore really just wasn't a match for them at the time. But it was also raced in the World Touring Car Championships by Moffat and Harvey, which was pretty cool. I just thought I'd mention that as well. So obviously a pretty reliable car there. Also on second in my list, a different trim level to what Shane was talking about, but the Holden Maloo for the 2013 version. I just really liked this car because it's just an insane amount of power in a Ute. It's putting out around 317 kilowatts, which is not massively powerful, but it's still enough to be able to go sideways around basically any corner because it's a Ute. But I just thought it was so cool that Holden did that, and it's basically just like a tradesman kind of Ute. Like well, really loaded tradesmen, obviously. But it's just so cool to see them around. There's a couple around in near where I live, and it's just so cool to see them, and they just make such a great noise. That's basically it. That's why I love these cars, really.
Well, when you see what they did with the Maloo, it's like we've seen powerful Utes all the way along from both Ford and Holden. It's only been in the last 15, 20 years for Ford really, but when you see 300 plus kilowatts in that's no small amount of power.
Yeah.
It's big horsepower.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't think you're going to see too many people use it for its intended purpose of the Ute and carrying stuff. You might put a couple of bags of shopping in there or something like that just to justify that you've used the back end of it. Really, it's the looks, and when you see the Maloo Utes like that, even from the start, they've always been good looking cars.
Yeah.
Or Utes, I should say, and so they've always looked good. And you just that's all you're buying it for. You just it's a good show off car. Like you can jump in it, you look cool because you're in a Ute. It's big V8, big power, so you're gonna if you feel like racing the bloke next to you at the set of lights, you're probably going to win. And obviously if you decide that you don't want those particular tyres on the car anymore, it won't take too much effort to lose all the grip on those because they're with no weight over the back wheels. It won't take too long to get both of those trying.
I was just gonna say, if you're trying to race the dude at on the lights beside you, better be careful with your foot because you can very easily wheel spin a car like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also the Maloo is also the cheapest Commodore that you could get at the time, even though it wasn't technically a full size car, obviously just a Ute. But if you're just getting it for yourself, it's a pretty good deal. Only at $65,000. It's still pretty hefty, but it's a good deal for what you're getting.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's like that for if it's just for yourself and your missus, you're like, yep, I'll get me a Ute, and that at least that definitely counts you out for being the designated driver.
Exactly.
If you're going into town on a Friday night or a Saturday night and you'll be like, oh, who's going to drive? Well, it can't be me because I've got a Ute. So, you'll be the one getting on the beers. But,
exactly.
So that was always the best loophole. But then you fall into the category of, who do I know that has a Ute? Oh, so-and-so's got a Ute. Oh, mate, I need you to do a tip run.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So my final car, my favourite Holden. I would have put the 1-tonner, but I feel as if I'm a little bit too biased there. But my favourite one is probably the A9X Tirana. Probably in the SLR 5000 version. I especially love the paint jobs on these cars, like you were saying, but also the fact that they put a body kit in the SLR 5000 version. They put a body kit as standard on the car, which I just think is just so cool for like the 70s. It's just I was just, when I saw that car, I thought I was talking to my dad about it. I'm like, oh, someone must have put those fender flares on and everything. Like, no, they came like that. I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, well, that's it. Look, it was sort of at the beginning of times when people were starting to bolt on little bits of extra extra, stuff onto the side of the cars, and for that to be factory was a pretty big thing. The big wheel flares, that big kicker rear spoiler always looked really cool on it. Obviously, by having those bigger wheel arches meant you could have wider tyres.
Yeah.
And so when you see them, always have those fat tyres on the back, and you could just see that it looks like it's like I said, kind of like an excited puppy. It's ready to go do stuff.
Yeah, you feel a bit like Peter Brock just as you're rolling off the showroom floor with that, with those body trim and everything. It just looks so cool. My final one, for my honourable mention, that didn't make the list, just because it isn't technically a Holden production car, is the GTXR concept car, which kind of looks a bit like a Toyota Supra from the 80s. If you haven't seen what this car looks like, it's not a massively known concept car. It's got like a massive wedge shape, nothing like any of the Tiranas previously, and it's got pop-up headlights as well. It was a concept car in the 70s, and they actually got pretty far into the process of producing it, but when they came to the point of where they actually had to commit to producing this car, they just thought the Australian market won't buy this car. It's probably about 10 years or so too early for its time. If they had been looking at it probably in the 80s, I think it probably would have been more likely to be produced. But just because it was like a 70s kind of car, it just was never happened. And it's a little bit unfortunate, because it'd be so cool to see one of these cars kicking around. There is one in Melbourne somewhere as a display car. It actually has an engine and actually goes. And then there's also a second car somewhere. It's not actually a full car. It has the engine and the gearbox, and it's got the whole body there. It's just not assembled together, apparently, because it was given to someone who actually worked at one of the plants, I believe. It's a bit of a shady story, obviously, but no one actually knows who it is, because he's kept his identity secret, obviously, because he doesn't want anyone knowing that he's got this really incredibly rare car where there's only two of them. But they do actually exist, but not technically a production car.
Yeah, well, I can't even remember that one, actually, to be honest with you. When I remember when you were mentioning that the Tirana concept, I thought the one that they built, sort of 15 years ago or so.
Yeah. That one was ugly.
That bright pink one. I thought,
that was awful.
I guess, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I'm sure. That's what you like. Then, good for you. But I thought, when you were mentioning that one, I'm definitely going to have to Google that one now. So, concept cars have always been, for a long time, they played a big part, especially with Ford and Holden in Australia. We've seen quite a few from both over the years. Like, obviously, you had the Holden effigy back in, I think, about 2005, thereabouts, and like that thing was just, it was just pornography, really. Like, it just looked amazing. But usually with a concept car, it's usually your sort of first telling of, this is where the direction of our company is going for the next 10 years. Yeah. So when you were sort of saying that it looked a bit too ahead of its time, it probably was about right where you would want it, where you're looking at what you're going to be putting into cars into the to the 80s. But obviously they eventually dropped the Tirana anyway, because the Commodore was probably sort of the halfway between a Tirana and
the Gemini.
And Kingswood anyway, and the Gemini as well. So it was probably it was probably just that's the direction they ended up going anyway. But if they had have kept going with Tirana production, it would have that probably, you would have seen a lot of those features come in through the 80s. Which even when you see, like, there was a Falcon or a Ford one, and it was a dual cab Ute that looked quite weird. It sort of had a semi-AU front end. It actually, it was the first hint of where you actually saw where the BA headlights were going. Because it looked a bit, they sort of squared them back up, didn't have that eye shape. And then, but that platform that they put that on eventually became the Territory. So it was a completely, it went from being a dual cab Ute to a Territory. But it followed along the same sort of thing as what they were going on. And that was a concept from the late 90s. So, It took a few years to come to fruition, but we eventually seen an all-wheel drive car from based off a sedan, which is what this other one would have been.
Yeah.
So it takes a while for stuff to come through. So I'll Google that car, and then we'll see how close to the mark that they might have been, even with going to the Commodore in the end. How close to the mark they were.
It's interesting because just from the styling alone, just like the massive wedge shape, like Holden never really went to that kind of style. They just kind of kept their like similar to what they like the Commodore VL, for example. It's not really that curved. It's still kind of a boxy shape, and that's where they went kind of in the 80s with their styling. So it's interesting that they didn't go with that kind of styling, even though they kind of predicted that's where it was going to go. And that's definitely where like Japanese kind of manufacturers went, which was a big thing in the 80s with the Celicas and all that. But they just really never went in that kind of style, which is disappointing because it would be cool to see those kind of cars around.
Yeah, I've just brought it up on Google now. Wow.
Yeah, it's cool.
It is different, yeah. But the front, it looks a little bit Thunderbirds-ish almost as well. When the lights are down. I would even throw in like maybe Toyota, what was it, Toyota 2000, or the GT 2000 or something like that. That was sort of from around the same sort of time. It looks a bit more like just a regular, like a just a little GT sort of cruising car, a little bit like an MX-5.
Yeah.
As opposed to what like a little Aussie muscle car like we used to see from them. So yeah, interesting car.
Yeah, it's not a massively known car like I was saying before, and obviously there's only like one that you can actually take photos of. That's why there's not too many photos. I only stumbled across it by chance. I can't even remember how I found it, but I'm like, wow, I've got to remember that car. That thing is awesome. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's it. And it had a couple of photos of the later Tirana concept car. Because it's been a while since I've looked at that, and now that I do it, I think it's pretty much just a Holden Cruise.
Yeah.
It's I think that's where they were getting it from. It's all like that, and that was before the Holden Cruise actually became a thing. So you could probably see where even because it's technically a Chevy Cruise, but you could probably see where they've got a lot of their design concepts from. And borrow them from this design, so you can sort of see where it all gets to eventually in the end. But I'll definitely take this Tirana over a Holden Cruise though.
Yeah. Righto. So that just wraps up our best of Holden cars. Next week we'll obviously be going through Ford cars, and that's Shane's favourite.
Yeah. I'll know a bit more about these ones. Yeah, I knew what looked good. I'm like, I know these are the cars, but of quite a few of the stats I didn't know anything of, so I'm furiously trying to Google them to try and get any of the power stats. But again, usually from a Ford fan, I think it would be the same for a Holden fan looking at Falcons and going they're not going to go buy one, but they still look at it and think, well, that's still pretty awesome. But then they're not going to research too much into what's happening with it. So I fall into the same category for the Holdens.
Yeah. So next weekend, in a couple of days' time, we're going to be racing at Winton, which is I like this circuit. I've visited it before. You can basically see everything from the main straight, as any fan would kind of know. It's when I visited it last year in December, I think, year before in December, in 2017. It's looks smaller. It's smaller in person than it looks on TV. On TV, they make it look bigger than it actually is. It's just so tiny. But obviously, it produces great racing, hence why they've raced there for so many years now. But last year, it produced some interesting results with Rick Kelly getting the first win for Nissan, and that was quite ironically just after Nissan announced that they were pulling their sponsorship from Supercars, and then Rick Kelly goes out and wins literally the next race. So that was pretty funny. I found that pretty amusing.
Yeah, that's it. It was only during that week that Nissan announced that they were going to pull out of Supercars at the end of the year, and then Rick Kelly comes out and he qualified okay and just had a really good race. we've seen like McLaughlin. He was in control. He's got 1,000 poles in a row there or something like that. And he was just looked like he was just going to make his way to the finish line and finish first. And then the safety car came out fairly late in the race, and he just fell asleep at the restart.
Yeah.
The safety car come in, and I don't know what he was staring at, but it's like green flags, and he's just stood there, and everybody started going around him.
I think Rick Kelly tried to sneak down the inside at the last corner, and that obviously caused him to have a poor run onto the main straight. But yeah, he was just caught napping completely, and Rick Kelly was keen as. And then we had that massive battle at the end between Kelly, Pye, and Van Gisbergen, which was really cool to watch. But it's, I think they resurfaced it a few years ago at Winton, so it's actually a pretty decent surface now, unlike what it used to be. But I think that we'll have some good battles over the weekend, hopefully, because it's like the shortest and most technical circuit that we've had on the calendar so far. But in previous years, Shell V-Power have been pretty dominant, but I think that's just because they've had good qualifying, which is what you really need to have. It's a bit like, you're saying it previously, it's a bit like a street circuit, but on like a permanent area kind of thing.
Yeah, because he just got so much sort of stop-start parts of the track. It's not really high speed, like the back straight and the main straight obviously would be the two fastest sections, but you're not even... I think you're still getting north of 200 Ks, but not a lot. You're certainly not getting up around that 260, 270 mark that we see them get at a lot of other circuits. So, but it's the type of circuit, like, you need these types of tracks. Like, they can't all be fast and flowing like Phillip Island or, I guess to Barbagallo to a lesser extent as well. But so you need these tight, twisty circuits, and we got plenty of street circuits as well, which they're fine. We all enjoy street circuits, but like for these ones, like it's a really good track for regional Victoria because it gets people in from like southern New South Wales and throughout all of regional Victoria, and even the ACT would probably they'll happily make the road trip if they wanted to, and because you got the campgrounds there, so you can go there and you can camp there the weekend, and you can get up, you can watch a whole weekend worth of racing, and you see people with these ultimate setups that, with TVs, they'll have their barbecue, they'll have everything there, so they don't need to move for the rest of the weekend. And apart from Bathurst, I can't think of anywhere else where you can really do that and be at the track the entire weekend and soak up the atmosphere. So, and as we've seen over the years, it does give us pretty good racing. Overtaking is hard, but it's not impossible. Strangely, it's turn 3, I think, where we see most of it, because when they come out of turn 2, it goes up a bit of a rise, and if your tyres are fading or you don't have the best mechanical grip underneath you, it's not that hard for someone to just hold a tighter line on the exit. And they've only got to get halfway up the inside of you, and that you've lost that position. So, because they'll leave it up to you. Then you can either fall back in behind me, or I'm just going to push you off the circuit anyway on the exit. So even then, like, we've seen cars that have barely got up the inside, but you just go a bit deeper under brakes, and the guy on the outside's like, well, we can either have an accident or I concede and fall in behind this guy. So. It's usually the number one spot out of any other place on the circuit. You see more overtaking there. Like, surprisingly, into the second last corner, you don't see a lot. You see the odd one, but not a lot. And then even into turn 1, it's quite a hard spot to do it. So, because even if they can get a bit of a run on you, you just got to cover the inside, and you can usually hold it. So. Surprisingly, when you get to those first turn 2 and turn 3, they're both right-hand corners. So if you can get it up the inside on the exit, that's where you're going to be able to hold it. So but I'm looking forward to this weekend. It should be good. I think the aero that it's been a point of contention this year won't play much of a part because it's such a slow circuit. So I still think the fast guys will be up the top. It's a circuit where you think that if Red Bull's twin spring issues are still an issue, they'll be highlighted here a bit because you do have a lot of change of direction, but they look like they overcome that a little bit at Barbagallo, so it will be interesting. I guess until we get there, we won't really know, but I think, the aero, I think it'll be quite even racing, and we might even actually see Triple Eight manage to get a win if they've got over their twin spring issues.
I think first of all, it's going to be absolutely freezing at Winton this weekend because it's.
I think they only know one temperature, and that's cold.
Yeah, it's regional Victoria, and it's coming into its winter starts this weekend, so it'll be absolutely freezing there. So I feel sorry for anyone who has to get up early, or especially the marshals. You have to stand out there. Hopefully, it's not too windy. But yeah, as you were saying, obviously, like Triple Eight, if they're on top of their twin springs, they might have a pretty good chance this weekend. But I'm thinking that possibly Penrite Racing, like David Reynolds and Anton Di Pasquale, might have a pretty good chance because it's really a circuit that can throw up anything because it's a little bit strange. So I think they'll really be trying to get in there and get a good result this weekend. But obviously the common factor is always just McLaughlin and Coulthard that are always up there. I think if they get a good qualifying, they'll probably be pretty dominant over the weekend. But regardless of who wins, whether it's Red Bull or Shell V-Power, I think the comments are going to blow up regardless because everyone's had time to mull over it over the couple weeks breaks we've had, and everyone's just going to blow up about it regardless of who wins, I think.
Yeah, well, that's it. Like, if we see like any of the Holden teams get a win, that'll kickstart the Ford fans. They're like, this is what happens when you change the aero. But like I said, it's not an aero circuit, so it's going to be. This one's more about mechanical grip, and it'll be whoever gets the setup right. And like you said, like Erebus, I reckon they're going to be up there this week. They've been on the improve the last couple of rounds, so I think we might even see them grab a win. You never know. It'd be good to see Davey get a win because it's been a little since the final race of last year, so it's been a little while between drinks for him. So. I think it'd be good to see him actually get a victory, but I think the hard one will just be those shell cars. Like McLaughlin, we know how good he is during qualifying, and knowing how hard it is to pass at Winton, you're not going to say that pole position equals race win. Yeah, but it's going to go a long way towards it. And surprisingly, this is actually a track where I think Coulthard's had the better results over the last few years over McLaughlin. So. You would expect him to be up there as well because he did get a race win here last year. I guess a little bit of good fortune, you could say.
It was one and only, wasn't it?
But it was his only race win of last year. So it was, so I'm expecting actually it to be quite close between them two. But I guess it'll come down to qualifying. Like if I'm expecting McLaughlin to get a couple more pole positions to his name. But with it being not a track that's not dependent on so much aero. Maybe you might see a couple of other cars jump ahead of Coulthard, maybe if he's not able to get the best out of it. But so I'm expecting the results to be a bit more mixed, and nothing to say that even one of the Tickford cars can't grab a win there either, which would also be good to see because the only race win they've got so far this year was Mostert, and that was largely because a couple of other guys that were going very fast weren't even in the race anymore. Yeah. So that was and McLaughlin, you just know that he would have walked away with that win pretty much. So it would be good to see even Tickford grab another win, and like a legit one as well this time on proper. Well, he still won it on merit, but not the same as if he had beaten McLaughlin fair and square.
Yeah. Righto, so that just about wraps it up for us today. Thank you very much for joining me, Shane.
No worries, mate. We'll look forward to this weekend.
Righto, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.